Tony Daunt is the executive director of the Michigan Freedom Fund, and he's here to talk with us about the group Voters, Not Politicians. And thank you again for being available. Sure appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me this morning, Michael Patrick.
So let's do a sort of a brief little history lesson here on how our districts are drawn and what would happen if that ballot proposal were to pass come November.
Well, I guess the quickest, easiest way to do this briefly would be to say that we do a census every 10 years. And then once that census is completed and the data is made available to the states, the legislature goes about drawing the lines for state Senate, state House, and congressional. And there's various laws that are in place and rules that dictate how those lines must be drawn. The Voting Rights Act is a big part of that. So the A-poll standards, as they're called, named after a man named Bernie A-poll, who came up with them. He was appointed special master by the Michigan Supreme Court in the 80s, and that focuses on keeping counties as the main building block, and it's based on minimizing county breaks. And then if you got to break a county line, minimizing municipal breaks. And then if you got to break municipals, minimizing precinct breaks. And if this proposal 2, was to pass, you would take the legislature completely out of it and remove the accountability that we have with those we elect to do this process.
So along comes a group called Voters, Not Politicians. And by the way, so that's why they're not perfect squares, or sometimes they seem unusual, like the 8th Congressional District, where you have people in the state capitol and people in Livingston County and people in Rochester, let's say, in Oakland County. And you might say that's a strange swath of people to connect together.
That is exactly correct. If we could make things perfectly square, then I'm sure there would be an effort to do that. But, Michigan, number one, Michigan isn't a square. We all know it looks like a mitten. And then the various cities that are within these congressional districts, state Senate districts, they're not square. And so it's built on the counties, and we have, no matter how square it's going to be, there's going to be a line, and it's going to divide people. Where on one side, you're going to have somebody in one district, and on the other, someone else. And that's just the way it is. That's the way it's been since the founding of this country.
And so this group called Voters, Not Politicians comes along and says, well, these lines are drawn to favor the party that's in power, that it's not really sort of fair. Is that an oversimplification of what they're saying, and what are they really saying?
I certainly believe it's a gross oversimplification of the process. Mm-hmm. And, I'm certainly not one to defend the entirety of the current system. As with anything, there surely are ways to improve how things are done. But the bottom line is, when this group came along last year, we immediately started looking into who their leadership was. And it was clear that this was a Democrat effort to take over the map drawing, because they haven't been able to get folks elected based on candidates or ideas, and they just didn't like what was happening. And they've very cleverly, but also cynically, come up with this process. And it's unfortunately a complex, unaccountable mess. And we saw last week, as we have been saying at the Freedom Fund for over 18 months now, this is a Democrat effort to change the system, to rig it in their favor. And lo and behold, finally they've admitted it and got a $250,000 contribution from Eric Holder, who was Barack Obama's attorney general, from a group that he runs related to redrawing district lines.
The National Democratic Redistricting Committee is the group you're talking about. So therefore, we should not think that this group wants to make it fair and balanced. They just want to tilt it their way. Is that what you're saying?
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying.
Do you think that the system should remain as it is?
Well, as I said a few moments ago, certainly there are always ways where we should look at opportunities to make things better, to fix them. But the way things are done here in Michigan are really, it's really is quite fair when you look at we've had a Republican governor for the last 8 years. We've had Republican attorney general for the last 16 years. We've had a Republican secretary of state for the last 24 years. And these are folks who are elected statewide. The district lines have nothing to do with it. So this idea that because we have a Republican Senate and a Republican House and a Republican majority in our congressional delegation are because of the lines is absurd. And it's unfortunately, I think it is cynical, and it's meant to trick people into thinking that, well, there must be something unfair at play here. And this, whether we think there's a better way of doing things, this is absolutely 100% not the solution.
Tony Daunt says, read between the lines, the redistricting lines and the lines of the ballot proposal that touts voters, not politicians, because it's just another brand of politicians trying to convince you to vote that way in the ballot proposal. So he says, vote no. He's with the Michigan Freedom Fund, and I'm Michael Patrick Shiels with you every morning on the great radio station you're tuned to right now or streaming audio and podcasting.